what has God called you to? Let's say, have God ever called you to something that absolutely made you shake in your boots? Sometimes God can call us to things and it's easy. You're like, oh yeah, God, I got this. I got this. No problem. And then sometimes he can call us to do things and you start going, oh, I don't know, God. I think you got the wrong person. What's something God has called you to do that just really kind of terrified you?
Mhm. I would say for me, any form of public speaking absolutely terrifies me.
And you're so good at it.
Oh gosh, I don't know, but
Okay. So any public speaking, has it always been that way?
yes. I mean, now it's not as scary, but I'm always terrified right before.
Yes.
That doesn't go away, but before I would just try to get out of it.
Right.
So I don't
Okay.
try to get out of it. When God says go, I go shaking.
There you go. All right. So you take a deep breath and you jump right in.
Yep.
Okay. Good. Who else? Something God's called you to had you shaking in your boots. Hey,
I would say for me,
Cindy.
it's being called to be like bold. I don't know if that it makes sense, but like I feel like I've historically been this person where I am a mediator. I am like, I don't like conflicts here over there, you know. But being like a little more outspoken in a good way, not in, you
Mhm,
know, crazy way, but not being shy, not being afraid, especially for God. Um
mhm.
and yeah, that because this I have this shy component of me. I do, despite being an extrovert. That's so it kind of likes public speaking, right? Like when you're in front of people or when you have to say certain things to people, you're like, I get a little, you know, scared, so to speak. So that's
Right.
something that I've grown a lot in recently. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Whew.
Mm.
MJ.
I was gonna kind of say the same thing Angelica said, where I'm kind of new to framing my mind in more terms of like paying attention to just rather than thinking things are just instinct or like, you know, polls from wherever of like being like, oh, maybe that is God talking to me.
Mhm,
But I definitely would consider myself more shy and introverted. It's difficult
mhm.
to just kind of be the one to step up, but there are definitely times where I see something and I'm like shaking and like bright red and I'm like, but I gotta say it. And you just like get it out and you're like, okay. There's like something that feels like, you know, you get that push on your back and you're like, oh, and I'm gonna talk now.
Right. Right.
I'm sorry. I don't know. Where do I begin? I'm more of an extroverted person. Um, I will speak up when I see things and then get in trouble. Okay. And then because I'm such a people pleaser and I want everybody to like me, then it kind of backfires on me and I'm going, oh, why did I say anything? You knew you were not going to win this, that kind of thing. A specific example, I would say probably putting myself out there with either art or what I writing or anything like that. That really scares me.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be in an exhibit this Saturday, so I was,
Come on.
yeah, it's one of those professional things, and then I don't know, they let me in. I don't know how that happened. So I even thought they made a mistake. Because my girlfriend, who is a much better artist,
Right.
she got in because somebody didn't send their art in. This is an
Mhm.
internationally juried show, which kind of is a big deal. And then they didn't send it in, and she got in, and I was like really stoked. But I'd say that is probably hard for me. And it's also hard if I have to speak up. And by the way, I think I know who LK is. I think she's my girlfriend, Lilia. So if that's her, welcome. Glad she came.
Yes, I am.
Yes, Lilia,
Yay!
my
Awesome.
Greek
You,
sister.
yeah, you'll have great exhibition, definitely. No worries.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome, LK. Yeah, God will often push us into positions that forces us to our knees. You know, a lot of times I feel like, God, if I'm not quivering, then something's wrong. Like Chrissy said, yeah, I'm always a little nervous. I take a deep breath and I just dive in and do it anyway. Fear can make us abandon God's calling for us. So that's really what we're going to be talking about is Satan wants us to abandon God's call. He doesn't want us to step out. Hey, Tap, he wants us to abandon the call. And the way in which he does it is he makes us fearful. Everyone on this screen, we're all afraid of something. Most people are afraid of public speaking. So that's kind of like a given. But, you know, there's always something that a person can throw you out there and you can go, oh. But what if God is calling you to it? So we're going to be looking at this. Much transpired in my life over the course of this week. So since Christy and I got together last on Sunday morning, life changed. Literally, I get with Christy every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. And between 9 a.m. on, life has just been a roller coaster. I'm like, whoa, 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 okay. So it's been a matter of just taking a deep breath, praying, and going, okay, God, if that's what you want me to do, okay, God, that's what we're going to do. Every now and then, God will do something like that. And He doesn't tell us in advance what He's doing with us. Why do you think that is? It would be nice of Him to tell us in advance, but He doesn't. Why do you think?
I would say because will we need him as deeply as we do if we already knew the lesson plan? That's him being the protector, the educator, the leader that he is.
Mm-hmm.
Every step of our journey is purposeful in his eyes, so it's not for us to know. We don't need to know what tomorrow holds. We just need to know who holds tomorrow.
Who holds tomorrow? There you go. The plan, the dream, it's so much larger than us. Always say we're simply a small part of His story. And He doesn't have to lay out the story for us. He's just saying, okay, today, Angelica, I need you to do this. And then tomorrow it might be an MJ. The next day, I need you to do this. It's like He doesn't lay out the plan for us because it really doesn't matter if we know the plan. He's saying, are you going to be obedient to the call? So, what I want to look at, very familiar, we're going to look at Joseph and Mary. We always talk about Joseph, Old Testament Joseph. Everybody loves him with the colored, coat. But I'm talking about the father, the earthly father of Jesus. What do we know about him?
Carpenter.
Go for it. Okay, I heard your voice.
He's a carpenter and hardworking man, most likely.
Okay, so hardworking carpenter.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Who else? What do we know about him?
This is Brenda. He is from Bethlehem. That's what we know about him, that he has his roots in Bethlehem, and he's also in the family line of Judah, the son of Jacob. So, and then also King David is in that family line as well.
Okay. Anything else? Christy.
We know that he was pledged to be married to Mary, who ended up being pregnant. And he was honorable enough that he was going to wait to divorce her quietly.
Yes. I want to break down his life. We don't know a whole lot about him. And usually what we do know about him, we hear at Christmas time. And it's just, a little snippet. He's just the offshoot, the man standing in the shadow of Mary. But I want us to look at him as a real person with a calling on his life. What was the calling on his life?
He was going to protect Jesus. He listened to God in a dream that Herod was going to come and kill all the babies from 2 years old and under,
Mhm.
and he listened. And the other thing is that he listened to Mary about the naming of the baby
Mhm.
because the angel told her his name is going to be Jesus. And in a misogynist society, I mean, you just do the math, right? He goes with it. He doesn't try to, pull rank or anything like that or force his own opinions. He's very humble. I wish we
Okay.
knew more about him because he's kind of cool.
Okay. All right. Christy.
Man, he had a huge calling. He was called to raise the Son of God.
Yes. How do you think he felt with a huge calling as that? Whether it's protecting Jesus, raising the Son of God. What was that like for him, you think?
I would think overwhelming. Why me?
Yes, it's overwhelming for all of us. I mean, we talked about the different callings, different things that God calls us to, and it makes us shiver. Imagine this man. He had to be shivering in his boots with a calling that heavy. So I want us to read it. And then I
Oh,
want
can
to,
I say one?
yes, Brenda.
Also, he has to almost like in a culture that has to save face, he is now having to carry the burden of like, oh, you just married this young lady and she's pregnant. What do you mean? Like, how could that have happened?
Yes,
So there's this really big burden that he's carrying of having to explain things that cannot be explained.
yes. Thank you. We're going to talk about how fear shows itself. And that's definitely one of them. MJ, if I can get you to read, it's a short one. It's over in Matthew chapter 1, Matthew 1, 18 through 25. Thank you.
This is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph. But before they came together, she was found to be with child through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was a righteous man and did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet, the virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him and took Mary home as his wife. But he had no union with her until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus.
Okay, let's talk about this experience. Put yourself in Joseph's shoes. Not just, we get these religious, we've gone to church all of our lives, ideas, but to break it down to here is a man who is about to marry this virgin, and she says, oops, babe, I'm pregnant by the Holy Spirit. What's going on? How do you think he's feeling? What's happening in the heart and in the life of this man? MJ.
Probably a little betrayed. Probably feels like he was a little hoodwinked. I don't know how their promise of marriage came about, but
Right.
especially too because lineage was so important in those days that like men often had like many children by many women, but it was still like that was their child, like they could trace who they were, who their
Mhm.
father was. So then if he's expecting to then be able to start his own legacy of children, and then now you're expected to raise someone else's, you'd be like, what?
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Brenda, I see your hand.
So culturally, even like all the way from Leviticus, there's a problem going on here because according to Levitical law, Joseph is obligated to report Mary for being pregnant, or even like any suspicion that she may have had intercourse with another man. So here she is telling him that I'm pregnant by the Holy Spirit. That's a lot to deal with. Like, is he going to report her? Or is like, and then if he doesn't, what does that mean for him? So everything is in lux right now.
Yes, yes, thank you. God's gift. Go ahead, Christy.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, just from a very human perspective, you know, you're pledged to be married, and not only do you find out your wife is pregnant, of course, an angel validates that. It's one thing to understand what's going on, but now it's like, wow, I don't even get to consummate with my wife until after she has this baby. Like, I mean, that alone has to be a challenge, you know,
Right.
along with the call.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Usually when we think about a calling on our lives or a gift from God, we hear it throughout scripture, there's this gift from God. We think of a gift, we think of it something being pretty and wonderful and shiny and beautiful, but often a gift from God or a calling from God can create chaos, confusion, disarray in our lives. And when that happens, how does it make us feel? What does it make us want to do or not to do? If God brings something into your life and it's not what you expected it to be, you think you're jumping up and down or excited to have at it?
I would ask him to explain that gift.
And how often does he explain the gift, Brenda?
He never does. He just kind of like, he's like, well, I've equipped you with, you know, you can do like, okay, no. He does explain it, but not in the ways I want him to explain it. So he'll explain it by like, okay, yeah, so you're waiting for this thing to happen. But wow, Brenda, I've given you the time of in the meantime. You can do whatever, you can do this, you can do this, you can do that. Oh, look, you can have friends and you can build a network. And you're like, but I'm waiting for the other one. So this gift of time you're giving me is not that pretty. So yes.
I have that.
Christy?
I was just thinking, I usually have the Moses response,
Which is?
which is when God called him to go back to Egypt. He was like, I'm not a good speaker, you know, send someone else. Like at some point, I was just like, just send someone else, you know. It's like, I want to try to get out of it until I
Yes.
realize I can't, you know, because at the end of the
Yes.
day, I can't deliberately disobey God. But if I can deceive myself into thinking there's another way and take it, but God don't let me do that. So
Yes. Yes. So often, guys, we will maneuver our way out of the will of God because of the discomfort, the overwhelmness, the frustration. God, it's not making sense. Why do you want me to do this? Who do you? It's like we can talk our way out of God's calling or God's will for us. You know, what did he tell Joseph? Because Joseph, well, he had some ideas, he had some feelings, he had some thoughts. So quietly, he was going to divorce her and move on. What did God say to him in his sleep?
He says,
Verse.
don't be
So
afraid.
don't be afraid. Yeah.
Don't be afraid. He didn't give him all of the, don't be afraid because I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. He simply says, don't be afraid. Why?
He also does say the virgin will be with child from the Holy Spirit too. So they do kind of like recredit him. So even if he's kind of looking at her out of the corner of his eye, like, they're like, no, she hasn't been unfaithful.
Yeah,
she's going to have the Son of God. Don't worry about it.
But he doesn't go on to explain that in depth. He just says, shh, shh, shh. As far as you're concerned, Don't be afraid. Cindy, I saw your hand.
Joseph, being a good Jewish boy, would have kind of connected the dots. This may have helped him to accept the situation because he would have known Isaiah 7:14.
Mhm.
He would have known all of it's not like us where we go, oh yeah, where do they say that? You know, and we only follow the New Testament primarily like in our churches and then the Old Testament. But the Jews knew that cold, especially after the captivity. There were more laws that were added after the captivity in Babylon so that they could not ever get into that situation again and be carried off because they disobeyed the laws in the Torah. So he went to shul, he knew this. And then now he's looking at her and it's in his living room. The interesting thing is they weren't married, they were betrothed.
Mhm.
And it's different than it is now. It's more like you can be betrothed for like 5 years
Mhm.
while he goes and builds a house for his wife, and then they have the big deal, you know, the village people come and sing and, you know, all, whatever, you know, the whole village has a big thing for
Right.
days on end. But so it's different, but he was going to like, you know, disconnect that relationship. And God says, don't be afraid. This is all in the plan. He
Right.
must have connected it in his head from his studies in the prophets.
Okay. What does he have asked? What does he tell him not to be afraid of? So I'm going back to what Brenda had said earlier. Fear conjures up all sorts of stuff. Let's talk about some of the things that he had to overcome being afraid of. And Brenda had mentioned what other people would say. Fear of perception. How often does fear of perception get in the way of us being obedient to whatever it is God calls us to do? Who's ever struggled with, I wonder what everybody else is going to think about me. I wonder what people will say if I do this. Anybody? I saw MJ, I saw a hand. Okay. I'm like, is it just me? Fear of perception. Why is that so huge in our society? Because I don't think it's just a few people on the screen. Gee.
I think it depends. Like I often don't fear perception of people that don't know me or that I like care about their opinions. But if it's people that know me and I do care about their opinions, then like I care a lot sometimes, especially like, you know, when Reggie was struggling with his mental health, Christy was there for that. It was really, really dark. And many people's advice was for me not to engage with him anymore, not to talk with him, like just squash your dreams of that ever becoming a reality.
Mhm.
And had I listened to the people that I really value and those that were seeing and care for me, you know, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. So it's like a balance of the perception of like, oh, these people probably think I'm crazy too. And am I? And like just re-going about it in my mind, like whose advice should I take? When should I take it? Is what they're saying wise? Is it godly? And just there's so many filters, I think, that I think of when I think of perception. So I think perception matters when it comes from those that are loving, godly,
Mhm.
and that have been through it with you, rather than random people who don't care about your eternal well-being.
Right. Okay. All right. So fear of perception is a big one. MJ.
I could be making this up, but I feel like in my head, I remember something too reading where like when they're studying like actual people's perception of pain in their body, that like isolation or rejection from their peers was like really high up and
Mhm.
actually feeling like distress in their body is like sending out the signals that they normally would if they were in like pretty severe pain.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Very good. Any others? Christy.
Yeah, I was just thinking, the fear perception, especially when your reputation is on the line, you know, and you're doing the right thing. And this just doesn't, there's no explanation, you know, I mean, because it's not like, oh, this has happened before, you know,
Right.
it's like this is the first virgin, you know, conception or whatever. And so
Right.
that's not something you can explain to your family, to your neighbors, and you know, and you have a reputation for being, like Cindy said, a good Jewish boy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So reputation's huge.
Very good. Yes. Brenda.
There's also, I think, the aspect of, like, for me, I'm most afraid of like losing my community if whatever I've done results in them ostracizing me, then it's kind of like, wow, I can't be an island. So that in itself, and I can see that for Joseph too. That like that was on the line for him.
Right. Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Cindy. I'm looking for the raised hands now.
I just put something together or kind of noticed a correlation between Joseph and Mary. So he has to worry about his reputation because he is taking a potentially adulterous woman as his wife. There's another guy in the Old Testament who was commanded by God, and it almost looks the same, to take an adulterous woman for his wife, and that was Hosea. So I was just listening to the Bema podcast, and it's a whole bunch of sessions, 4 of them, on Hosea, and it is epic. And he takes his wife Gomer. And I'm thinking Joseph also remembers this and goes, oh, wow, what am I getting into? Because Hosea was tasked to be a prophet to tell Israel how bad it's going to get. So that was what I just thought of.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think we need to see, because there is a calling on all of our lives. We don't always see it, and we don't always feel that we're standing in it. Sometimes God will highlight it, meaning he'll turn the light up on it, because you become the starring person in the scene at this moment. I always look at our lives in terms of a script. There are times in which you're the star of that particular scene. Other times you're just a bit player walking past. So you can kind of go through life and there's no real bumps or nothing really major happening. And then all of a sudden, something major is happening. But God calls us to fear not. When it's your turn to do whatever it is he's calling you to, fear not. Because God's gifts they can come wrapped in so many other problems. This gift that God was giving over to Joseph and Mary came wrapped in problems. You know, we look at it, we go, wow, they're the parents of the Son of God. That's wonderful. But they're looking at it as, yeah, but look at what this is doing to my life. So a lot of times, God will call us to some things that's going to shake up our lives a little bit. What made him do it anyway? What do you think? I know he was a good Jewish boy, but what made him do it anyway? Brenda.
God says so, and he had a good heart, but God said so, and he also actually, hold on, he kind of had no way out in a way. I don't think he was left with a lot of way out there.
All right. What if he had completely rejected the call? I'm sorry, before we go there, MJ, I saw your hand.
Oh, I was gonna say that he could have still quietly divorced her. Like, God was calling for him to stay. He's saying, don't worry, take her home. This is gonna be your son. This is his name. But he still could have been like afraid of what his peers would say, you know, like even the law saying that he should report her, he could have. Nothing really was stopping him except for like his own faith and like, God told me not to fear. I'm going to do what God said.
Mhm. Are there any examples in scriptures where someone blatantly decided, no, God, I'm not going to do this? Cindy.
I was just thinking about Jonah, and he would have known that story too, right?
Yeah.
I was
I was thinking that too.
oh my gosh, he's boxed in, okay? He's got a good heart, and I think he loved Mary. I
Mhm.
mean, somehow this guy's just got a really good heart. But if he turns tail and runs, he'll know he's disobeying God, and he knows a story like that. So I think he was probably pretty smart he was humble and smart. So I'm going to give him a lot of credit.
Okay,
I'm going to give
G.
him 5 stars.
I would
G.
also just think like how hard it would be to when you experience God or the other realm, like if an angel talks to you, how hard that would be to deny or push away. Like, yeah, maybe some people can do it, but when Moses is seeing the burning bush, like it captivates you and you're like, I gotta listen. Even though, like, yeah, maybe I'll give some excuses here and there. Like when you leave it, it's kind of like, it's to me would replay in my mind. Like, dang, an angel said this to me. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm either crazy or this is God. And if it's God,
Right,
like what am I gonna do then?
right. Good. Christy.
Yeah, I was just thinking, especially once the angel visited him and even told him that, well, not only, like, don't be afraid to take her home, but also, oh, what, like, just even how he says, you're to give him the name Jesus because he will save his people from their sin. It's like, okay, not just, okay, what God was calling him to do. It's like, whoa, God, you're entrusting us to usher in the Messiah, the Savior of the world. Like, and so it's just kind of like, yeah, there's that fear, but it's like, God, you're choosing me, to do this. Like you're trusting me with this task, and it's just, I don't know. It's like, okay, I guess you're going to equip me because again, he would know all the stories of those who did obey God and what God did.
Right. Okay, good. Angelica. Muted.
I'm still learning how to work this on my phone. So I was thinking of how I think even so this is, I guess we're still talking, this is fear in a sense, but I imagine the feeling or even fear of disobedience could be worse, than the actual going. You would much rather go with God's will because the consequence of not doing so. And so there's, other than like, there's the fear of perception and, initially even the fear of maybe even losing control, not having the life that you want and all of these things. But in the end, not choosing that path. And like Cindy had said, like knowing the history, knowing the stories before and what God has done, you only feel compelled to follow. But yeah, that's my thought.
Okay, no, it's good. What does this whole thing say about God? And I love, Cindy, that you took us to Jonah, because that's another great example. What does it say about God? You had Jonah, who God had calling for his life. He went running off. God gave him a breather, gave him a moment, and then he got him back. So what if Joseph, with this huge calling on his life, had kind of freaked out a little bit like Jonah? What would God have done? Just based on the history of who God is, what would he have done?
He probably would have given him a landing spot just to think about it. I mean, God isn't like, oh, that's it. It's a 1 or a 0. It's, humans and parents can be like that. But yeah, that's a really good point that you brought up, that he gave him some time to think. 3 days in a whale, it smells bad. You get vomited up on a beach. I think that would change my attitude quite a bit,
Gee, thank you,
So
Cindy.
I think even like Joseph with his brothers, when his brothers came to him, Joseph didn't automatically like, okay, you're forgiven, guys. Here's everything. I have everything. You can have it too. He was like, yeah, you can go back home. You can go get something else for me. He was like, it probably took him some time for him to get to the point where he was like, I can face them and want to help them in their time of need, because they weren't there for me. So I think, like what you're saying, God gives us time to work through some things if we need to, especially those like, it says each man. Oh wait, does it say that? Well, God knows our heart. We'll just go there. God knows our heart. So I think if he knows, like he knew Pharaoh was probably not turning. So there wasn't no time for Pharaoh, but obviously for people that follow him, I think he knows like, okay, they're going to come around, but I got to give them some time, more signs, more people, whatever it takes. I feel like God has that type of compassionate heart. That's the type of heart
Right.
that I have to remind myself of God. Like, no, he does care for those who love him.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. Chrissy.
Yeah, I was similar to what Gianna was saying. I think God already knows. He's all knowing. So he
Mhm,
already knows our heart, where we're gonna end up. We don't know
mhm,
when
mhm.
we're called and when we're trying to run away or when we're trying to hide, just like Adam and Eve in the garden. He knew they were not hiding from him in the sense of he didn't know where they were. It's just that we have to come to our own conclusion of, okay, this is where I am, and God already knows. So
Yes.
that's kind of comforting, knowing that, okay, God will not call me to something that he will not equip me to do or help me to do, because I've never seen anything fail when God called someone to do something.
Right. Very good. MJ.
Um, I think about this kind of often lately too, is that like God does have a plan for us, but he also gave us free will. So he's like, here's what you should do, but he's not like, he does give us time. He knows that we have our own thoughts, emotions. He created us, he knows us. And then he
Mhm.
still gives us the option to kind of too. But like lately, I feel like I think about things in terms of like, even if they have that set plan, but we still have our own free will, like, then I guess, yeah, for like Jonah and stuff and other stories, there is still every once in a while kind of a constant intervention, like a knocking at the door
Right.
in between our own kind of amusing of our own sort of wishes and desires. But
Right.
I feel like it is interesting to look at for stories of the Bible, or even like today's day and age, if it's like all this that God provided, but we still have free will. Like we could
Mhm.
still turn to choose our back or turn our back, but then he's still, it seems kind of consistently there to be like, do you want to come back yet? Do you want to do my plan? No, still doing your plan? All right, I'll wait. I'll be like, do you want to do my plan now? How's that working out for you?
Mm, mm.
Okay. G, did you have something?
Yeah, I don't want to dominate, but it just came to my brain that like, wow, if Peter had not come back to God several times, like just where he would be, and him saying or going to be the rock, like yet he denied Jesus 3 times, like coming back from that, or him trying to go after cut off an ear. Like I often see myself in Peter multiple times, multiple situations, and I'm like, yeah, God had to like give Peter some time because he was like rah rah, all up in arms. The sons of Zebedee, like they're so sons of thunder, like those type of people that God calls often
Right.
need wrestling, and they're not just like robots.
Right. It's important. The reason I asked that question, I'm sorry, Brenda, I see your hand.
Oh, because I was trying to go, okay, well, what if Joseph said no and God, because usually we say, oh, God will find someone else, right? So I was going, yeah, God would have found someone else. But the problem is that Joseph's story was written from a long time ago, like kind of like that essence of like trusting the story.
Mhm.
Joseph's like he could not get away from it. He cannot get away from it with Jonah, like as Jonah did, or even knowing the story of Jonah, knowing the story of Hosea, he couldn't get away from it. But also, he was written into the lineage. There's no
Mhm.
other one to come in and be the husband to Mary. He had like, if he's looking at his lineage, he has to be like, there's no way. So so that it's kind of like, God creating the landing spot, God giving him that chance, like Jenna was saying that, hey, he would allow him like Peter did, give him some moments of like, hey, coming back to Jesus moments. Okay, are you coming back? Are you
Right.
coming back? Yeah, because it's already written. He is already in that lineage and he
Yes.
cannot get away.
Yes. I wanted to discuss this because you just really see just the incredibleness of who our God is. Initially, when I was studying this, I ended up writing down, okay, God, you're up to something. It's like God is always up to something. We just don't know what it is. He's
Yeah.
gone ahead of us. There's a game plan laid out, and he's loving enough and patient enough to wait for us to catch up to it. He was willing to wait for them to catch up to his plan. He knew what was going to happen. He knew where it was going to go. As Brenda said, it was already laid out, but he had to wait for us to catch up to the plan. I love that in this story with Joseph, he comes to Joseph in his sleep. Why do you think that? What's up with that?
There's no distraction when you're sleeping.
He was determined for Joseph, for Joseph to hear him. No distractions. Joseph, I know you're afraid. Already know that. Now, shh. I need you to listen. So he came to him at a time in which he had his undivided attention. Look at the details that God is going through in order to reach him. What details have God gone through to reach you? Think about your life, your story. What details have God gone through just to reach you?
Okay, so I look at this, looking at Joseph's story, there's that one piece that I'm always enamored by. Judah actually gets 2 children from his daughter-in-law, right? And from those 2 children, Perez becomes becomes the descendant of Joseph, right? Very, like, it's kind of like, wow, what if my mom never met my dad? Or what if my mom wasn't, like, so hot about my dad? I'm not here, right? Like, it just becomes that, or what if they didn't go to the same school?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here. What if, because I grew up in a village, so there's no way I ever thought I would be coming to the US, but what if my dad doesn't mistreat my mom so much that my mom is like, I quit, I'm calling it quits, I'm getting out of this relationship.
Right.
I'm going to become a single mom. And then down the road, and then because she's trying to support 2 children as a single mom, she takes on a part-time job as a musician, and that music group takes her on tours across the globe, and she lands in Canada and takes the bus and seriously does the border crossing, okay? Illegal immigration, and border crosses into the US.
Right.
And then she's like, I want my children to come. So this is how it works out. What if none of that happens?
Yes.
I am not here. I don't
Right.
meet people at college and then become a Christian and join the International Churches of Christ. Like, I'm not here. You guys are not
Yes.
even listening to me talk right now. Yeah.
Which would be devastating. Guys, why is it important that we pause and look at how detailed God has been in our lives? Why is that important for us?
So that we don't forget the story and we don't become delusional and lose sight of how great he is at working in our lives every day. We don't
Okay.
lose hope.
Good. Tammy?
Reflection and redirection. I believe those 2 are important. Let us see what he's been doing, because the only person who can see the future is God. So to be able to say, that's why, then it could help you potentially redirect, realign, readjust your path to then follow him, because you've seen the steps that he's been doing in the past.
Yes. If you think about the Josephs, you think about any of these Bible heroes as we think about them. Yes, as Cindy said, they knew the history, but it's more than just knowing the history. If we only know the history, it's like saying we know the Bible. But just knowing the Bible doesn't identify what God has personally knitted together in my life. I believe Joseph was able to tie together, oh, but God showed up there. Ooh, and you did that. Ooh, when we can put those pieces together, and God calls us to something that's scary, do we fear? Absolutely. But we can take a deep breath, we can fall asleep, or whatever we need to do, and we can hear God enough that we can say, God, I'm scared, but I can do this. He said, do not fear to Joseph. He also said, do not fear, if we continue the story, to Mary. Anytime he calls us to something that's out of our norm, he's saying, Cindy, do not fear. G, do not fear. He says that over and over and over again because fear shows up in so many different ways. Fear of perception, how are the people going to perceive us? Fear of, I don't know, provision. Can I do this? Can I afford to do this? God, I don't know if I can make this happen. How often do we not do something because we don't think we can afford to do it? When God is like, don't you know I'm greater than money? If you think about Joseph is having to try to find a place for his now wife, soon to be wife, to give birth. And everybody's saying, there's no room at the end. There's no room. He obviously must have had some kind of money or something to barter with. He kept going in search. He wasn't looking for a manger. He was looking for a hotel room. But sometimes God puts us in a situation in which money isn't the answer. It wasn't about money. God wanted him to be in a manger.
Yeah.
It's scary when God passes by all those things that make most sense. You know, he calls you to something and he's like, no, I don't want you to get that job. You're like, what? No, I don't want you to get reimbursed. You're like, what? So sometimes God cannot make sense and he doesn't explain it to us. He's just saying, do not fear and then keep going.
Yeah. Also, the word complacency keeps popping up too when you were, I think, just mentioning like people's perception and fears. I think complacency is a huge
Yes,
component of why people, don't hear God, don't follow him. It's complacency because we see in a multitude of instances, but of course, Jesus is the biggest one. He stretched Jesus in the wilderness.
yes.
Jesus sat at more tables and prayed at more tables than he turned them over, right? So, how uncomfortable was that to have to practice restraint? I think a lot of people are so complacent in who they are, where they are,
Yes,
what they're doing, that they do not desire to seek and walk and get uncomfortable. I just want to throw that out there.
absolutely. We do not like being kicked out of the nest. I know I've used that image before with G, the eagle kicks the little eaglets out of the nest. How? They make it uncomfortable. Mommy makes the nest uncomfortable, so it forces them out. We don't like to be uncomfortable, but often what God is calling us to is uncomfortable. So he's saying, do not fear. Why? Because it's his plan, it's his story. He's already gone ahead of us. He's up to something. I think about the procession of Christ when he tells them, "Go to the next city. You're going to find this coat that has never been ridden before, tied up." I'm like, how do you know all of that? God's up to something. So the next time you feel this calling on your life and it terrifies you, I want you to stop and go, God is up to something. I may not know what it is, but he's up to something. I've mentioned this change of events in my life that took place this week out of nowhere. Now I'm always talking about my next, I don't know, my next act. So I was talking to my family about my fourth act. All of a sudden I get this phone call from my girlfriend. She says, "Hey BJ, I'm doing this Broadway show, one night only. And it's just me telling the story of my life. But you are an incredible part of that story. So I see it in my head as you're standing here and you're singing me through this story. Would you be willing to come do this show with me?" Guys, I haven't been on a Broadway stage in almost 40 years. Literally, the last time I was on the Broadway stage was in Into the Woods, 88, 36 years ago. So my heart, my immediate thought was, okay, what can I do to help you, my sister? I mean, that was my immediate thought. But then afterwards, all the flooding of, oh, girl, it's been 30 some years. Oh, I don't know if you're ready for this. Oh, I'm sure she can find somebody. Bing, all this stuff started going. And I went, stop. Okay, God, what do you want me to do? My conversation with God has always been, I am a conduit to do what you need me to do so you can pass through. And that's literally what she was saying, is that you have been the conduit to my life that has helped me to find my way to God. So I can't tell this story without you being a part of it. But my first instinct, once left up to me, was to push it off. It's too risky. It's too scary. I can't do that anymore. It's been a long fear. And God simply said, BJ, do not fear. This is a calling I have on your life to serve a purpose that has nothing or very little to do with you. But I need you to move on. So it just made me think of Joseph. It made me think of Jonah. It made me think of so many who no doubt had that same panic. Not me, Moses. I can't speak. You want somebody else. And God is saying, when I have a calling on your life, I'm not asking for your resume. I'm asking for your yes. Are we willing to say yes? Okay? Give me some feedback.
It just resonates with me. I definitely I lived in fear for so long. I think that I also was like a Jonah. And I didn't even realize it. And it's just interesting to see how my life has transformed in being obedient to God and his thing to do, and not living in fear. I had anxiety for so long and didn't know I had anxiety. I mean, I thought it was normal, actually, how I was existing. And
Yeah.
so, before being saved and getting into my word and things, and it's been a beautiful thing.
Good.
It's been beautiful. So I love it. I look forward to continuing to obey more. And yeah, I still have my moments where I'm like, but it's well worth the sacrifice. So
Right. Very good. Very good. All right, guys. Anyone else? Let it close it out.
It's just good, just reassurance, reoccurrence, increased discernment. It's not accidental that your topics continue to center around trust, around being uncomfortable, and discernment, hearing that small, still voice. It's not loud and booming. He talks to you when you sleep. He catches you in the car. He hears you, he talks to you in the morning, before bed. And so then to get on these biweekly calls and to have life going in 30 different directions for all of us, and then for it to still resonate about how present and how busy and how purposeful he is. And especially on a night like tonight, is very grounding to just come back to the word.
Yes. Thank you, Tab.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cindy, was that a hand?
Yeah, I really appreciated this. I just feel that fear, of it's kind of like the other shoe dropping or something bad's going to happen. I have this very Jewish kind of mindset. If something bad's going to happen, this is the reason why I didn't do drugs. This is the reason why I never did cocaine. I had no desire because I knew deck is stacked against me. But anyways, I digress. But this was really helpful. And I'm going to sit down and spend some time with God. Like, how am I being like Jonah? That would be really important, an important thing for me to ask him. because you
Good.
know what? The time is short and your kids are watching and, you know, they're looking at you, whether your family, you know, it's your life and your doctrine. So are you obeying God or are you making up excuses? This was really good and very grounding for such a night as
Mhm.
this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes.
absolutely. Thanks for giving us a good escape. Good escape. Not an escape, a good escape.
It's God's story. We're just minor characters in it. Again, sometimes we're highlighted and other times
Yeah.
we're not. But
Amen.
God simply wants us to be ready whenever He turns the light up. Amen.